Okay, good morning. Today is the 27th day of Tammuz, the 16th day of July, and we are starting a new and last book of the Pentateuch of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, Sefer Devarim, the book of, as they call it, Deuteronomy in English, which really means, I think, a second name, or what we call in Hebrew, Mishneh Torah, the review of the Torah, the entire book is almost entirely Moses speaking to the Israelites, and usually it's customary to divide it into three speeches that he gave. He began saying this book, as it says in the first verse, in the third verse, that it was in the 40th year, in the 11th month, the first day of the month. So 11th month from Nisan is Shvat. So it was on the first day of Shvat. And we know that he passed away on the 7th of Adar, which is the month after that. So this entire book took 37 days to speak. He spoke it first, and then God told him to write it down. So this is different than the other books of the Pentateuch, in that it wasn't dictated to him by God. It was what the sages describe as the holy presence of God was speaking from his throat. Shechina medaberet mitoch grono. And as such, it's considered to be an intermediate, a stage, a bridge between what we call the written Torah and what we call the oral Torah. Because here Moses was speaking, and it itself became the Torah, but it was written down as if it was part of the written Torah. So we have this intermediate stage of this book. We said it took 37 days for him to complete it. 37 is both the value of Yechidah, which means the singular one, the highest part of the soul. And we understand from that it's an allusion to the fact that Moses was at the highest level of his soul in order to speak this, in order to speak something out of his own will, which then was accepted by God as written Torah. And it's also the value of Hevel, Abel, Adam's son. And I don't know if we've talked about this very much before, but there's a whole topic in Jewish mysticism called reincarnations. And in general, most of the souls in the world belong to either the pedigree of Abel or the pedigree of Cain. And Moses is from the pedigree of Abel, not just a pedigree, but he's considered to be the main reincarnation of Abel, which is why the Torah could only be given when he and Jethro met up. So the Torah is given in the parsha called Jethro, Yitro, in the book of Exodus, because Jethro is considered to be the main incarnation of Cain. And so, in that sense, they made up many generations later, with Jethro converting and agreeing to follow Moses' prophecies. So that's a little bit about the background of this book. But it is different because of this, because it's speeches. So he's basically reviewing everything that had happened during their 40 years in the wilderness. And I want to come now to verse 5. And how do we know that he reviewed the Torah? Well, first of all, if you read the Book of Deuteronomy, you see that almost everything is a review. But, and we'll get to this later on, if we take a break, I don't know how we'll do it, because it's exactly during the time that we might be taking a break. But let's see what we'll do. What we call the mitzvot, the mitzvot of the heart, duties of the heart, are actually almost entirely discussed in this book. We don't hear about the duties of the heart so much before. For instance, the mitzvah, the commandment to love God, the commandment to fear God, the commandment to unify God in the sense of to believe only in one God, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. All of these, they come from this book. And in a sense, it's very surprising how is it possible that this wasn't described earlier. But then we find that there are a number of different commandments that are only discussed in this book, and we have to find some kind of mention of them in the previous 4 books. We have to find an allusion to them to see that it's only a review. So it's a very complex book in many ways, and it's the book that's most quoted in the Hasidic tradition because of this phenomenon that most of the duties of the heart appear in this book. I want to focus in on verse 5. It says here that when they were camped on the east side of the Jordan River, Moses began to explain the Torah, this Torah, saying, I'll read it in Hebrew, Be'ever Yarden be'eretz Moav, ho'il Moshe be'er et haTorah hazot le'mor. So he began to explain. What does it mean to explain? So the simple explanation is he's reviewing everything. He's going to review everything. But it's a little bit more than that. Rashi says that he explained it Beshivim lashon persha lahem. He translated it into 70 languages. That's what it means to explain it. This almost the same formulation appears later in chapter 27, verse 8. But there it says he explained it well, be'er heitev. And also Rashi there explains that it means that when they cross the Jordan and they arrive on the other side, the western side of the Jordan, they should erect a monument made of 12 stones, and on these stones they should write the entire Torah. Well explained. There the explanation is in 70 languages. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how big these stones have to be. I don't know how it can be done. I imagine that they didn't do the entire Torah. They must have taken highlights or the main things and then wrote those in many languages. And those stones apparently still exist somewhere, because we know we have a lot of testimonies to that time period. In any case, why does it have to be in 70 languages? So the different commentaries give all kinds of explanations. Some of them say that there were many converts who now came to join the Jewish people after the victories over Og and Sichon, the kings of the Amorites. And these converts did not know Hebrew. So Moses had to review the Torah in 70 in all the languages of the people that came, basically. That's one of the explanations. Another explanation, which is a little bit harder to accept, is that there were still leftover mixed multitudes, converts from Egypt, who did not speak Hebrew yet, and therefore needed the Torah translated into their languages. But the two more modern interpretations of this come from the Lubavitcher Rebbe and from Rabbi Ginsburg. So Lubavitcher Rebbe says something very interesting. He says, when you study Torah, everybody agrees that to fulfill the commandment to study Torah, you have to learn in Hebrew. That everybody agrees. That if you study in Hebrew, you have to say the blessing, Asher Gichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ad divrei Torah, who commanded us with his commandments and gave us the mitzvah of learning words of Torah. But that's only if you learn in Hebrew. What about if you learn in another language, because most of the world doesn't know Hebrew? So says the Lubavitcher Rebbe that this is the extension of the Torah into every generation. This wasn't such a big question. The last time this was a question in the world was probably during the Roman Empire. That was the last time that there was any interest on the part of non-Jews to actually study the Torah in their own languages, because they were not scholars or people who were considering conversion. We know that during the time of the Roman Empire, there were synagogues not for Jews. There were actual Noahide synagogues, mostly in Asia Minor, but around the Mediterranean basin. And I've talked about this before, that many of the sages thought that the Roman Empire, which was in dire need of accepting a monotheistic religion, would accept Judaism. But that didn't happen for various reasons that we may have discussed in the past. So there were many non-Jews who were interested in understanding the Torah, and so they had to learn in their own languages. And so this hasn't been a discussion for 2,000 years. But says the Rebbe that today, if a person is learning Torah in English, or in French, or in Russian, or whatever, they have to say the blessing before, because of this verse, which says that the words of Torah were explained. Moses gave the stamp of approval, as it were, that the words of Torah can be said in all languages in the world. Rabbi Ginsburg added to this that it's not just a passive reality in which we say that these are words of Torah, but rather this is a active command to not only teach Torah in Hebrew, but to teach Torah in every language, in all the languages of the earth. Another beautiful thing here is, I said that in 27:8, in Deuteronomy 27:8, there's another word that's added, heitiv, which is written hey yud tet bet. When you write this word in what's called the backside of it, then it's hey yud tet bet. It's like it's appearing. That altogether is equal to 70. So it's a beautiful allusion to the fact that this is 70 languages. The word ho'il, Moshe, here there's no real translation to it. Here he says, he uses the Rashi's commentary, he says ho'il is like he began. But ho'il is like to take permission, to invite himself to do something. That word has the same letters as Eliyahu. Because the question that we might ask is, how could Moshe know 70 languages, even though he grew up in Pharaoh's household? But how could he do this? So this is what's called a revelation from Eliyahu, Elijah. Every time that we speak in Torah about somebody being able to do a super feat with their mind, we talk about the revelation of Elijah. That's what it's called, that the person is able to do something that's not normally possible. The additional word here, the Rashi translates it as, he began, hitchil, is equal to Melech HaMashiach, the King Mashiach. So this is a very beautiful connection here, that this final book is, in a sense, a declaration for the future, when all the nations of the world will come to listen to the Torah, will want to bond to and create a covenant with God through the Torah, and so on. And it all begins here on these last 37 days of Moses' life. Thanks very much. Hope to see you during the rest of the week, and see you tomorrow.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?